In today's lesson, we're going to talk about aperture. What exactly is aperture? Aperture, quite simply, is the amount of light your camera lens lets into your sensor. Aperture is sometimes called f-stop because that's what you see on your lenses and that's what you adjust in your camera is your f-stop. The lower the f-stop, the lower the number, the wider the opening on the lens, and therefore the more light that gets into your camera. Conversely, the higher the number, the smaller the opening on the lens, and the less light that gets into your camera. So as an example, here are three different lenses. We have a 50mm prime lens, a 70-300 zoom lens, and a 70-200 zoom lens. Each lens will tell you its f-stop, the amount of light that it will let into the lens. The lower the number, the faster the lens. Now, what do I mean by faster? Well, the more light you let into hit the sensor, the less time that sensor needs to build up a photograph. So the lower the number, the lower the f-stop, the more light that gets in, you can set your camera to a faster shutter speed. Because of this, you'll hear a term, a fast lens, getting thrown about. A fast lens just means it has a low f-stop number. This little lens, the Nifty 50, has an f-stop of 1.8. It's called the Nifty 50 because it's a 50mm prime lens. A prime lens is just a lens that has a fixed focal length like this one, 50mm, that's all it does. This lens is a 70-300mm lens. It has a variable aperture. Most zoom lenses have a variable aperture. This one goes from 4.5 to 5.6. That means at the 70mm end of the lens, the minimum f-stop that you can set on your camera is 4.5. When you zoom out to 300mm, the minimum f-stop you can use is 5.6. This is a 70-200 f2.8 lens. Even although it's a variable focal length lens, 70-200, it has a 2.8 aperture all the way through it. So it doesn't matter if I'm at 70mm or 200mm, I can shoot at f2.8 all the time. Now you may think that this lens, a 70-300, would cost more than this lens, a 70-200. After all, this lens has a better focal length, 70-300, extra 100mm. In reality, that's not the case. This lens will set you back between $500 and $600. This lens, on the other hand, will set you back around $2,200. Why the big difference in price? Well, this is a variable aperture lens. It goes from f4.5 to 5.6 depending on the focal length that you're shooting at. This is a fixed aperture lens. It doesn't matter what focal length you shoot at, you can shoot at f2.8 all the way through. Why is that such a big deal? Well, when you shoot in manual mode, you have your f-stop set in, your aperture set in, you have your shutter speed set in, and you have your ISO, and between the three of those you get the perfect exposure. Now if you zoom out on this, your aperture changes. It goes from 4.5 to 5.6. That change in aperture means that you need to change either your ISO or your shutter speed on the camera to compensate. With this one, you don't need to worry. You can set it at f2.8, you can have your shutter speed and your ISO the same no matter what zoom length you have this set at. That's part of the reason that this costs a lot more than this lens. Now, byproduct of your aperture, your f-stop on your lenses, is it also controls the depth of field. The lower the number, the shallower the depth of field. The higher the number, the greater that depth of field is. Now, what do I mean by depth of field? Well, that's simply the focal plane that's actually in focus when you take your shot. And we're going to demonstrate that right now. We're going to take this little 50mm 1.8 lens and do a series of 3 shots to show you what I mean by depth of field. The first shot will be shot wide open, and by wide open I mean at the lowest setting, f1.8. Whenever you hear people talk about wide open, it means that their lens is set on the lowest setting, the lowest aperture that it can go. So let's go shoot. Now, just before we go to shoot, there's one thing I've got to do. I've got to put on my tam o' shanter, and you'll see why in a second. So here's the scenario. I have 3 little friends sitting on the table here. My little Scottish friend, little Channel 9 guy, and in the background there you'll see a little Viking. First off, I'll take a picture at f1.8. This is the lens wide open, and you'll see that the little Scottish guy is in focus, but the other 2 aren't. Next, I'll take the exact same shot, but I'll change my aperture, my f-stop, to f11. There you will see that the little Scottish guy is in focus. The Channel 9 guy is in focus behind it, but still the little Viking guy is out of focus. And lastly, I'll take the exact same shot again, but this time I'll be doing it at f22, and you'll see that all 3 subjects are in focus now. So here we are. I got my tam o' shanter on, I've loaded up Lightroom, and I've imported 3 pictures that we took a couple of moments ago. Here's the first one. As you can see, my little Scottish friend is in focus, whereas my other 2 subjects here are completely out of focus. This is what your f-stop does. The lower the f-stop, the narrower your focus range. Here's the second picture, taken at f11. My little Scottish guy is in focus. My Channel 9 guy is basically in focus now as well. But my little Viking dude is still out of focus. Now notice what happened with the shutter speed. Here we go again at f1.8. We have a shutter speed of 1/1250th of a second. Same settings, ISO 3200. This time we stopped down to f11, and look at the shutter speed. It went all the way down to 1/40th of a second. Now here's the third and final picture, and you'll see that all 3 are now sharp. Same setting for ISO 3200. We're now at f22, but look at our shutter speed. Our shutter speed has now dropped all the way to 1/10th of a second. That's very, very slow shutter speed. That's something that you have to take note of when you're changing your aperture. It affects your shutter speed. And there you have it. You now know about aperture or f-stop, what the numbers mean, and how it will affect your photograph.